and I'm a student financial aid consultant. I've been in the business for over 20 years, and I'm here to talk with you about the student financial aid process. And hopefully, by the end of the presentation, you have a greater knowledge of it. I don't know everything, so if you do have a question I can't answer, I will find out that answer for you. You can drop your questions in the Zoom chat box and we'll discuss them and I'll address them at the end of the session. Or if you prefer, you can email me or contact me at our FAFSA helpline. As I'm sure Ms. Simon has already told you, the Louisiana Department of Education is asking that the class of 2021 submit the free application for federal student aid as a requirement for graduation. And the purpose of this is to ensure that your money is ready and waiting for you when you do begin college, hopefully this fall. Now, because college can be pricey, you need to start preparing for the costs of a post-secondary education. These include equipment, books, and supplies, such as textbooks, notebooks, a computer if you need one. Personal expenses like your phone bill, if you're living away from home, your laundry, fuel for your car, and any food purchases outside of your meal plan. Room and board, which can include your dorm, or if you're living in an apartment, you'll have to include electricity, water, and gas, your groceries, and any cleaning supplies you might need, and tuition and fees, like your parking, library, technology, and athletic fees, and campus transportation. You've probably noticed that colleges will list their tuition and perhaps fees, but they are not always showing all of these expenses when you check their websites or their cost of attendance. And we'll talk about that in a little while. The good news is that financial aid is available from the U.S. Department of Education, our state government, the college or career school that you are planning to attend, and nonprofit and private organizations. Every year, the federal government provides more than $120 billion in student financial aid, and a lot of it does go unawarded. So we just want to make sure that you are ready and you have your portion. Types of federal student aid include the federal Pell Grant, the federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, the Teacher Educational Assistance for College and Higher Grant, the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, federal work study, and federal direct subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans. Federal student aid grants are a form of financial aid that does not have to be repaid, so you always want to accept the grant monies that you're offered. And those will include the Pell Grant for undergraduates with financial need, FSEOGs for undergraduates with exceptional financial need. And sometimes you'll see on your award offer, you might be offered a Pell Grant and an FSEOG. Then there are the service grants for military parents who died defending the country following 9/11. This is for their children. And the Teach grants for students pursuing a teaching career. The Federal Work Study Program provides part-time jobs to help students pay for their education expenses. So when you tell the financial aid office that you're interested in federal work study, you're going to be considered for this program. You need to note that this is its own FAFSA question, and we encourage all students to check yes, they're interested in federal work study, because this is not going to obligate you to work on campus, but it will let the financial aid office know to offer you a job if it's available. This looks great on your resume once you graduate from college and you're able to say that you worked perhaps in the department that you're studying, Um, in the athletic department, there are just a variety of jobs available. Now, your earnings with these jobs are going to be paid directly to you, the student, and they should be used to pay for your college expenses. Direct subsidized loans are based on financial need, and no interest is going to be charged on this type of loan until you graduate or cease to attend. So you're basically getting an interest-free loan for 4 years while you're in school, but these are financial need based. There are also direct unsubsidized loans, and almost everyone is eligible for this type of federal student loan. Um, but interest does begin to accrue on these loans once they're fully dispersed and then throughout the life of the loan. So you can see that there is a big difference between the direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans. You always want to accept the subsidized loan portion first. And you can remember this by telling yourself the U and unsubsidized means that you always pay the interest. If you are offered loans, you want to accept the federal student loans first because payments are not due until you graduate or cease to attend. The interest rate is fixed at a lower rate, and no credit check is required for this type of loan. Now, these loans are in the student's name, so you're building credit while you're in school. However, with the private loans, you want to accept these only as needed because most require payments be made while you're still in school. The interest rate will probably be variable and often it's much higher, and they almost always require a cosigner. Students and families, be sure that you're doing your research if you do select a private lender because interest rates on these loans and their incentives to borrow are going to vary. So to dispel the myth, almost everybody is eligible for some type of federal student aid. All federal student aid and most institutional and private aid is contingent upon completion of the free application for federal student aid or the FAFSA, which launched on October 1st and does so every academic year. You're going to be completing a FAFSA for each year that you're in college. Student financial aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis. So the sooner you get your FAFSA completed, the better because of these, because the money is awarded on a first come, first served basis, you'll be at the head of the line. Now remember to pay close attention to and to meet your FAFSA deadlines. There will be deadlines set by your college, by the state. TOPS does have a deadline for submitting your FAFSA, and then federal student aid has a deadline as well. I'm sure Ms. Simon has already asked you to have your FAFSAs complete by a certain date to meet your graduation requirement, so make sure you're checking with her as well. You want to begin the FAFSA process by collecting all of the documents that you need to complete the form. You can begin the FAFSA and then save your work and come back to it later. But if you have all the documents in front of you, it shouldn't take you longer than 30 minutes to complete your FAFSA. You're going to need the student and parents' social security cards, because the FAFSA must reflect the name and numbers exactly as it's printed on your most recent card, even if your name has changed. You may not have changed it with Social Security, but you do have to use your most recent card in reporting your name on the FAFSA. Your 2019 federal income tax returns for both the parents and for the student, if applicable, because to use the IRS data retrieval tool, you must enter your name and address exactly as it's printed on this return. If you don't have a copy of your return, you can always contact your tax preparer for a duplicate copy, or you can request a tax transcript from the Internal Revenue Service. You'll need your W-2s because there's information here that might not be found on the federal return, and bank statements and records of investments because you're going to be asked to report the balances of these accounts as of the date you submit the FAFSA. Begin by creating the Federal Student Aid ID because this allows the students and the parents to identify themselves electronically when accessing federal student aid websites, such as the FAFSA. It's going to consist of a username and password that's created by you and it should only reflect your personal information. Each student and one parent should create an ID by visiting fsaid.ed.gov, and only your email address and phone number should be listed in your FSA ID. Now, this is the same site for the parent and the student, but you don't want to share any information. Most of the time when we hear about students and parents having trouble signing their FAFSA, it's because the student has used maybe the parent's mobile phone number as their alternate number. If you don't have an alternate number, you can leave that field blank. And this is a good time to mention that you want to use your personal email addresses, students. If you haven't already created a personal email address, it's a good time to do that because once you graduate from high school, your school email address is going to be disabled and federal student aid will not have any way of getting in touch with you. So make sure you're preparing and creating your FSA ID with your personal information. Your FSA ID username and password is your official electronic signature and it's legally binding. So make sure you're recording it and keeping it in a safe place. You're going to use this every year that you complete a FAFSA. If you don't have access to a computer, you can download the FAFSA mobile app. It's called My Student Aid, and you can use it to submit your FAFSA on your mobile device or your mobile phone or any other device that has internet access. Or if you prefer, you can go to the FAFSA.gov website and complete your FAFSA there. Now we find that students prefer to use the mobile devices, and that's fine. You can get started and enter the student's information. Parents might want to finish up on the web-based version. All the information is going to be integrated and one FAFSA will be submitted. You want to begin the FAFSA by logging in with the student's FSA ID. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, and it's the student's FAFSA. The parent FSA ID is going to be used to transfer tax information into the FAFSA if you choose, and to sign the student's FAFSA. The high school class of 2021 should complete the 2021-2022 FAFSA because that's the academic year that you're applying for financial aid. Now, if you're planning to attend college this academic year, you'll have to complete the 2020-2021 FAFSA as well. But just make sure that to meet your graduation requirement, you are completing the 21-22 FAFSA. That's a lot to say. There are 8 sections that should be completed before submitting your FAFSA. The student demographics, where you'll be asked as the student to provide your social security number, your name, birth date, your email address and physical address, your residency status and your gender. In the school selection section, where you're going to report the name of your high school, the colleges that you would like your FAFSA data to be sent to, and your housing plans on each of those campuses. In the dependency status section, you'll be asked to consider 10 questions, which will determine whether you're an independent student or a dependent student in the eyes of federal student aid and for FAFSA purposes. You'll be asked the number of dependents in the student's household, and the parent's education. A lot of parents aren't sure why they're being asked what their education level was, but it's important to note that there is additional financial aid available on some campuses for first generation college students. So be sure you are answering that correctly. Then we're going to move into the parent demographic section. And this is where parents will be asked to report their social security numbers, their names, how long they've lived in Louisiana, their marital status, and of course, their email address. The parent financials and student financials will look just the same, but they will be asking each of you your information on your working wages, any federal benefits that you might have received, and savings and investment balances. Now, when you're moving through the FAFSA itself, look up in the top left-hand corner and you'll see it will state whether they're asking for student information or parent information. Just check each time you move to the next section. And then it's almost time to sign and submit. This is where your FSA IDs are going to come into play. And lastly, once you press submit, you're going to see the confirmation page. Now, as you move through the FAFSA, if you have questions about the question, you can look over to the right-hand side and you'll see a question mark within a dark blue circle, and you can check here for a more detailed description of the question itself. You can select the hyperlinks that are provided within the FAFSA. You can request a FAFSA online chat with Federal Student Aid, or you can call Leela's FAFSA help. For this session, I'm going to cover the most commonly asked FAFSA questions, but if you have one that I don't address tonight, either drop it in the chat box or give me a call at the FAFSA helpline, or you can email me directly as well. The citizenship requirement. It's important to note that the student must be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen to complete a FAFSA. But if his parents are neither, the student can still submit their FAFSA. They'll just use zeros any place that a social security number is asked for. Young men between the ages of 18 and 26 must register with Selective Service to be eligible for federal benefits. And because grants, work study, and student loans administered by Federal Student Aid are considered federal benefits, you must be registered. Now, if you have not already registered and you choose not to register with Selective Service when you're completing your FAFSA is going to be considered incomplete and you will not be offered federal student aid. So guys, just make it easy on yourself. If you choose to register, you can select Register Me within the FAFSA and you will automatically be registered with Selective Service. Only the colleges that you list on the FAFSA in the school selection section are going to consider you for federal student aid. They're not just going to send out your personal and financial information to every school across the country. So make sure you're adding all of the schools that you're considering, and you can add up to 10 at a time. Now, if you plan to apply to more than 10 colleges, there are instructions in the school selection section that will assist you in doing this. To determine your dependency status, these are the 10 questions you're going to be asked. Will you be 24 or older by January 1st of the school year for which you're applying for financial aid? Are you married or separated but not divorced? And remember, they're asking the student these questions. Will you be working on a graduate degree? Do you have children who receive more than half of their support from you? Do you have dependents other than children or a spouse who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you. Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training? So this excludes boot camp and basic training. Are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? At any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care? Or were you a ward or dependent of the court? Are you an emancipated minor? Or are you in legal guardianship as determined by a court? And these are a couple of those hyperlinks within the FAFSA. If you're not sure what each term means, just click on the hyperlink and it will give you a description of it. Now remember that legal custody is not always considered legal guardianship. So students and parents, be sure you're reviewing your documentation before you answer these questions. Are you an unaccompanied youth who's homeless? Or are you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? If you can answer yes to just one of these questions and you can provide a legal document supporting your claim, you're considered an independent student for FAFSA purposes, and you will not be required to provide parental information. Now, for FAFSA purposes, unfortunately, just because you might file your own taxes or you live alone and support yourself, you're not considered an independent student. This is the biggest one. Who is my parent when I fill out the FAFSA? And if you live with both of your biological parents, then that's going to be easy. You just list both of them. But for others, the parent or parents that you lived with the longest in the past 12 months should be listed on your FAFSA. So if the parent you lived with the longest in the past 12 months is separated, divorced, or was never married, that's the parent you're going to list on your FAFSA. Now, if that parent is remarried, you're going to include that parent on your FAFSA as well. In other words, federal student aid wants to know the financial standing of the household that the student has lived in the 12 months prior to the date that the FAFSA was submitted. If you're identified as a dependent student, but your parents will not provide their information on your FAFSA, just answer, I'm unable to provide information about my parents. State that you do not have a special circumstance and submit your FAFSA without parental information. But it's very important that you contact your college's financial aid office to discuss that because the financial aid offices are actually the entity that are going to be awarding this financial aid. It's not going to be federal student aid. The FAFSA is just a vehicle for gathering your information and sending it on to the financial aid office. So don't be shy about contacting them to talk about your situation. To expedite the process of your federal student aid, the student and parents should use the Internal Revenue Data Retrieval tool, if possible, to provide your income information. So if you're having trouble doing this, you can contact Federal Student Aid directly, or you can call Leela's FAFSA helpline, and we have some tips that might help you. If you did not work in 2019 and earned working wages, you're just going to manually enter that within the FAFSA. Just state you're not going to file, or perhaps you haven't filed yet. In that case, you will select, I will file the 2019 return. Sorry, people are still entering the room. Okay. So that would be the reason you would manually enter your income information because using this data retrieval tool is going to greatly diminish your chances of being selected for verification. Once you have entered the irs.gov site, this is what you're going to see. And you need to make sure that you have your tax return in front of you, because you need whatever you entered on your tax return for 2019, you need to enter exactly that same data in the federal website. They're not looking for what's entered on your FSA ID or within your FAFSA. That's checked with Social Security. The IRS wants to see exactly what was printed on the tax return from that tax year. So we've seen situations where the tax preparer misspelled the person's name. They used the street instead of a drive or an avenue, or perhaps you've moved since 2000, you filed your 2019 return. Just make sure you have that return in front of you and make sure all the information reflects what's on that return. Then you're almost finished with the FAFSA, but before submitting it, you'll be asked if you want to review the student aid report, and I highly recommend this. Now, this is going to show every question you were asked on the FAFSA and your answers to those questions. And a review of this report is going to ensure that financial aid receives accurate information so that they can process your FAFSA timely. The student and one parent should sign the FAFSA with their FSA IDs. If you submit your FAFSA without the signatures required, it's going to be considered complete, and the financial aid office will not be able to begin processing your financial aid. You also will hear from federal student aid telling you that your FAFSA is incomplete. You'll have to log back in, go ahead and make your FAFSA corrections and sign your FAFSA and resubmit it. Once you do submit, you're going to see this FAFSA confirmation page pop up. This is the only time you're going to get all of this detailed information. Now, an email will be sent to the students. An email will be sent to the student's email address, and you will have a confirmation, and much of this information will be provided in that email, but this is the only place you're going to see this very in-depth, detailed information. So you have the option to print this page, and I would do that. You're going to find out what happens next and what steps you need to take to complete the student financial aid process. You'll see a list of the colleges that are going to receive your FAFSA data. You can review your estimated expected family contribution and consider your financial aid estimates. And remember that these are estimates based on your FAFSA answers. Every college financial aid office is going to verify the information that you've submitted, and they will be determining aid on your campus. You will be hearing directly from them about your financial aid office. You will not hear that information from federal student aid. Once your FAFSA is fully processed, then it is shared with your colleges. At that time, each financial aid office will begin to identify any aid on their campus that you might be eligible to receive. Now, if your family's financial situation has changed since 2019, you'll want to contact the financial aid office because they have the ability to adjust what you saw on your FAFSA confirmation page as estimates, and they can use their own professional judgment to override those estimates. Your net price is going to be determined by their offices by subtracting any grants and scholarships that they can offer you from your cost of attendance, and that will be your net price. You can either pay that difference in cash or accept student loans to pay that balance. Your student financial aid offer should reflect their college's cost of attendance and any grants, scholarship, work study, and student loans that you've been offered. So be sure you're reading this carefully and respond to any requests so that they can process your aid. Now remember, you're going to receive a separate financial aid offer from each of the schools that you've listed on your FAFSA. And most colleges are going to wait until you have completed the admissions process before they contact you with a student aid offer. So make sure you're completing your admissions applications and requirements as well. Accept your financial aid in this order: scholarships and grants, because this is gift aid that does not have to be repaid. Federal work study, because it's earned money, you've already worked for it, so you don't have to pay that back. And then your loans. This is borrowed money that must be repaid with interest. So this is something you're trying to avoid. The student financial aid process is explained in detail in Leela's FAFSA completion guide and workbook for the class of 2021, and it's free for Louisiana high school seniors. So if you haven't already received this from your counselor, you can shoot me an email at carmichael@leela.org. And I'll also include Leela's senior checklist um, to help you stay on track this year. Scholarships we haven't talked about. This is gift aid that does not have to be repaid, and there are thousands of them offered by schools and employers, nonprofits, community organizations, religious, social, and professional groups. Some are merit-based, which are awarded on academic achievement or a combination of maybe a special talent, trait, or an interest that you have. And other scholarships are based on financial need. Um, a scholarship might cover your entire cost of tuition, or it could be a one-time award for a few $100s, but either way, it's worth applying for because it's going to help reduce the cost of your tuition and your education. You can learn more about these from your counselor in your high school counselor's office, or contact your financial aid office at the colleges that you're considering. They're a good resource for scholarship dollars. They see a lot of them coming in through their offices. This year, Leela offers 2 scholarship opportunities. High school seniors can apply for a $1,000 FAFSA completion scholarship. They can do so at leela.org, find out the details there, and also grab that scholarship application. And for those of you who have older siblings, we have a Choose Louisiana scholarship for those attending a college in Louisiana. For students or parents who do need additional help paying for college, after you accept all your scholarships, grants, federal and state dollars, Leela has a nonprofit education loan program, and you can find out about it at leelachoice.org. Now, your questions are always welcomed, and now is the time to ask them. Use your Zoom chat box, and I will check that and answer in the time we have remaining. If you prefer to talk to me privately, you can always call our FAFSA helpline or send me an email, and here's the address again. I'm going to check the chat